Hey, I'm Nick Stabile. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for RatPac Dimmers, and today we're going to be speaking with Matt Ardine. He's been gracious enough to come in here and talk to us about Unity and how he uses it on set. Unfortunately, because we're in a tight space, both of us will be wearing a mask. So bear with that for now, and RatPac hopes that you all stay safe and healthy out there. Thanks for tuning in. So here we are today with the illustrious Matt Ardine. Matt, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
In a new RatPac media trailer, which is something that Craig and I have been working very hard on for the last few months. So we're hoping this will be a learning tool for people and a place people can go to learn about our new products, and we can do live Zooms, etc., etc.
Glad to be here.
Well, thank you. So first I want to talk about Matt Ardine. Recently you just did something for the Super Bowl, is that right?
Yeah, the opening to the halftime show was actually pre-taped. A couple weeks prior, we shot it up in Castaic Studios. It was a one-take motion control shot.
Right, and we're using RatPacs?
Oh yeah, we had a RatPac Unity in the grid. We had a RatPac Unity on the ground, and then another RatPac Unity, RatPac PDB 10s. I think we had 5 of those on the ground.
Wow.
And a couple 12 by 200s, I believe, on the ground too.
And you were mostly focusing on that car shot, right? The very opening of the
Yeah,
weekend.
that was the one shot that we did for, I think it's like the first minute of the halftime show.
Right. It looked killer.
Oh, thank you.
And I also know you're doing some things with RatPixel, is that right?
Yeah, RatPixel was the softbox that was over the car.
Uh-huh.
Normally, whenever we light a car, we do like a softbox with pretty reflections in there. In this case, we wanted that, but we also wanted animations because the set was supposed to look like Las Vegas, and Las Vegas we know has lots of twinkling lights and stuff. So with the RatPixel, I was able to have a softbox, but also add some animations in it to give it that Las Vegas feel.
That's awesome. I mean, you know, I look at what you've done recently with Desperado, the bass drop. I mean, that was... Did you tell me about that for a minute?
Yeah,
that was amazing.
That was a commercial for a tequila company where they wanted to film in the zero gravity airplane. And of course, you can't really mount too many lights in there because people are floating around and hit the wall. So we had to come up with an idea of how to light the space with lights that people could bump into. So it was all pixel ribbon. In that case, we put in like 150 universes of pixel ribbon attached to the plane. And then for 2 days, I did those zero gravity flights.
Wow. Were you sick?
The first flight, I did feel a little bit sick. And then I found out as soon as you hit the double gravity, lay down and you'll feel fine. So.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And of all the things that you've been working on recently, from iHeartRadio to High Note, the Hyundai commercials, Burger King, Kia, all of them, what has stood out to be your favorite?
Oh, it's hard to say. I think one of my most favorite things is Transparent Season 5. They decided to do a musical feature-length film. And so I was the lighting designer for a couple of the musical numbers in there.
Why is that most interesting to you? Just curious.
I've always loved musicals. A movie just came out last night called Music that Sia directed. That was another musical I've done. And I really enjoy doing dance choreography and then using the lighting to enhance the dance choreography in the story.
Cool. So today we're going to talk about the Unity box, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to separate these into segments. And I think where I'd like to begin is just with the GUI, because I feel like the dimmer techs have a hard time getting the iPad set up, or if they want to get the computer set up. So if we could just go step by step through how do I set up the GUI via the iPad, and talk about the IP settings, and then we'll get into a little bit about the DHCP addressing and some of the other questions that the guys have. So why don't we start there with setting up an iPad with the GUI?
Yeah, so to me there's 2 main ways to use the Unity. One is just with DMX and not using Ethernet, and that's going to be pretty limiting for you. And then the second way is to use Ethernet, which is going to open up the possibilities to all the features that this can do. And whenever you're designing a rig that is using Ethernet devices, the first thing you need to do is create a spreadsheet of all your different IP addresses. Because as we know with Ethernet, we can't have 2 devices on the network that have the same IP address. If we have one Unity at this IP address 192.168.1.201, and then we have another Unity on that same IP address, it's going to create lots of issues on our network because that's just how Ethernet works. So the first thing I like to do is create a spreadsheet that we plan out all the devices that have IP addresses and what their IP addresses will be, so we make sure in advance that there'll be no IP conflicts.
That's great. So you get to a set and you have a bunch of Unity boxes. What is your first step? How do you start?
The first thing I'll usually do is go in and set the IP address right here on the face of it. And so let's just assume that we made our IP spreadsheet already, and we know that this device is gonna need to be in the 192.168. And for me, I usually like the 192.168.0 range. And then normally I'll put my unities around the around like 51. And the IP address for me is a way to organize all of the devices. So normally we'll say like, okay, everything on this network is going to be 192.168.0, and we're only going to change that last octet. And we'll say all the unities, we'll start them at 51, and maybe we have 30 unities. So there'll be 51 to 80 will be our unities. And then maybe our consoles will be IP address 1 through 10. So we're just using chunks of IP addresses to organize our network. And so now we created that, and we know that this is supposed to be 51. And as we can see there, it's really simple to just go in here and change our IP address. Maybe if we were setting up the next box now, we'd set it to 52. But we'll keep this one at 51 for now. And the default subnet mask 255.0.0.0, 95% of the time, that's just what you're going to stick with.
The subnet mask.
Yeah, you don't really need to change that in a lot of situations. There are very niche situations that you may want to change your subnet mask, but I'd say for 95% of the users, 95% of the time, that's the subnet mask you're going to keep there, which is the default in the Unity with the current firmware.
Great. So now I have the box addressed. I'm ready to start doing the other functions of the box. What's next?
The next step I'd say would be setting the protocol that you're going to be using. And this box can do 2 Ethernet protocols. It can do streaming ACN, and it can do ArtNet. We can also send DMX in if we wanted to and use that as a source. But in this situation, we're going to say that we're going to use streaming ACN. And then with streaming ACN, there's 2 ways to send the data. One is through multicast, and one is through unicast. Most situations you're going to be using multicast because it's just much easier to set up. But it does have unicast possibilities if that is the way that you want to go.
So now, isn't there an offset situation that I need to know about between ArtNet and SACN?
So SACN to me is a much easier protocol to set up. Its universe starts at 1, and I think it goes up to 63,999. Let's see, I can press this here and we can find out. Well, I'd have to spin this knob for quite a while, but so it's pretty easy to address on streaming ACN. But on ArtNet, they made things a little bit funky, and it would be like a whole half-hour class on addressing for ArtNet. But ArtNet, in a way, starts at universe 0, so that can sometimes be confusing for people. And most of the feature films and TV shows being produced, at least in the USA, are using multicast streaming ACN right now.
So that's the choice. That's your choice, and that's pretty much what the guys should be using out in the field.
Yeah, most of the time that's going to be your easiest way to set up.
And that starts at 1, is that right?
Correct. Starts at 1, nice and easy.
Okay, great. So we've chosen our protocol. We're using streaming ACN in multicast.
Yep.
And we've set the pack to do that. What's next?
So now I'm going to set the universe for the dimmer. I say dimmer, but it can actually be a number of functions. We'll go over that in a minute. So for me, on my typical shows, we're going to put most of the dimmers on universe 1, typically. So right now, it's set that the dimmers on here will listen to 1.
How do I know that the dimmer is set to universe 1? Where do I see that?
Right here on the front screen. This universe here is 12 channel output setup. That's what the universe for the dimmer is going to be listening to.
Right.
And then the second half of that, of course, is going in and setting the start address for the dimmer.
Correct.
So maybe this is the second unity in here. So I would put this at 13 because the first unity was taking up 1 through 12.
So when you set it to 13, you're not setting dimmer pack in 10s. You're okay with going, there's 12 channels, we're going to go to the next one, it's going to be channel 13. You're okay doing that. Some guys like to go this is 1 through 12. My next dimmer is going to be set at 20.
Yeah, I generally don't skip DMX addresses in the patch. For one, it makes it faster to patch for the programmer in the console. And two, you always want to leave room open in the universe because you're always adding new lights. And if you completely filled up that universe, you have to then need to go add a new universe when you add a new light.
Because you're skipping 8 channels.
Yeah, because you're skipping all these channels
Understood.
in between, and then those 8 channels are pretty much useless. You can't really fit anything in there. So I always like to patch everything with no gaps in the universe.
Okay, great.